Hello to anyone that decides to listen to this. This is a reading of the Overlord light novel by Kugane Maruyama. I'm about to talk about why I'm starting this reading, so if you want to skip this part, I will have the actual start time in the description. First off, I apologize if I pronounce some names wrong or some things wrong. I am not a Japanese speaker. This first chapter is the first in a possible series. I'm horrible at public speaking, so I'm doing this to be able to talk a little better. There will probably be mess-ups in speaking with the chapters because I am doing this in the first recording in order to track my progress. As it is a way for me to learn, I most likely won't try and do any different voices. I will be using Skythewood translations to read this light novel, but please consider supporting the official release. Thank you, and here we go. Overlord, Volume 1, Prologue. The knight in full plate armor stood before the girl and her little sister, his sword raised high. His blade gleamed in the sun, and he poised himself, ready to end their lives in a single merciful stroke. The girl squeezed her eyes shut tight and bit her lower lip. She had never asked for this. She had been forced into her present circumstances. If only she had some strength, she might have resisted the enemy in front of her and fled. However, the girl did not have that strength. Thus, she could only be one outcome in this situation. That would be the girl's death, at this very place. The long sword fell. And yet there was no pain. The girl gingerly opened her eyes, which had been squeezed shut. The first thing she saw was the sudden, motionless longsword. Then she saw the sword's owner. The knight in front of her was frozen in place. His eyes looked somewhere off to the girl's side. His completely defenseless posture clearly displayed the fear that filled him. As dawned by the knight's gaze, the girl could not help but turn and look in the same direction as him. And so the girl gazed upon despair. What she saw was darkness. It was infinitesimally thin, yet unfathomably deep blackness. It was a half oval of obsidian that seemed to protrude from the earth. It was a mysterious sight that filled the ones watching with a powerful sense of unease. Was that a door? The girl could not help but think so after she saw what lay before her. As her heart lurched, the girl's conjecture was confirmed. Something seemed to be coming out of a shadowy passage. And in that moment, it resolved itself in her eyes. A deafening shriek came from the girl. It was an opponent which humanity could not overcome. Twin points of crimson burned brightly within the empty eye sockets of a bleached skull. Those 2 points of light coldly scanned the girl and the others present, like a predator sizing up its prey. Within its fleshless hands it grasped a magic staff that seemed divine in nature, yet inspired dread in equal measure. It was like a crystallization of all the beauty in the world. It wore an intrinsically detailed black robe, and it resembled nothing so much as an incarnation of death, born from the darkness of another world. In an instant the air seemed to freeze. It was as though time itself had stood still in the wake of the Supreme Being's advent. The girl forgot to breathe, as if the sight had stolen her soul away. Then, in the silent realm, the girl began choking, gasping for air. This avatar of death must have manifested itself in order to guide her to the land of the dead. It was only natural to think so. But then, the girl who thought this was suddenly realized something was wrong. That was because the knight who had been planning to kill her from behind was now completely still. Gah! A cry that sounded like a wail crept into her ears. From whose mouth had that sound come? It felt like it could have come from hers, or that of her little sister, shivering from fright, or from the mouth of the knight that had been about to kill her. A skeletal hand slowly extended itself, its fingers spreading as though reaching for something, and they moved past the girl, towards the knight behind her. She wanted to look away from it, but fear kept her gaze in place. She had been feeling that if she averted her eyes, she would see a far more horrible sight instead. Grasp heart! The incarnation of death clenched its fist, and the little girl heard a sound of crunching metal behind her. Though she was afraid to take her eyes away from the figure of death, curiosity got the better of her, and the girl wrenched her eyes away, whereupon saw the body of the knight. He was sprawled motionless on the ground, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He was dead. There was no doubt that he was dead. The danger that had almost claimed the girl was no more, but this was no cause for celebration. The death that stalked her had merely taken a more concrete shape. That death drew close to the girl, who watched it with terrified eyes. The darkness in her field of vision grew even larger. It's going to swallow me up. As the girl thought this, she clutched her sister tightly to herself. The notion of escape no longer existed within the girl's head. If her opponent were human, she might have been able to cling to some faint hope and struggle desperately for her life. But that being before her shattered that hope like spun glass. Please, at least let me die without pain. That was all the girl could hope for. Her shuddering sister hugged her tightly. All she could do was apologize for her weakness, for being unable to protect her sister's life. She prayed that her sister would not be lonely as they went on to the afterlife, because they would be traveling there together. And then, the end and the beginning.